Are Negroes asking the right questions about their history? We must consider who we were before the sub-Saharan and transatlantic slave trades, and how do our ancestral origins shape our identity today. Let's explore our roots and discover who we truly were before this journey began. In the last session, we talked about why textbooks on slavery date only to the 16th and 17th centuries. Whitewashing history was a way to keep Negroes ignorant of their identity as Israelites. And it's time to wake up to the truth and start pushing back against the deceptive lies. The Institute for Environmental Research and Education says the color of the very first human being was likely a medium to dark brown, a shade that provided crucial protection from the sun's damaging UV rays in the equatorial regions of Africa, where early hominids evolved. Now we know that Adam did not evolve. The Most High created him. Let's go on. This article from Science Insights is asking this question: what was the first skin color of humans? It says the earliest members of the human genus almost certainly had dark skin. So dark pigmentation was the baseline condition and remained so for the vast majority of human history, it says. It goes on to say that skin color in indigenous populations worldwide tracks almost perfectly with UV intensity. Researchers have found that skin reflectance, a measure of how light or dark skin is, can be modeled almost entirely as a linear effect of UV radiation levels, particularly autumn UV exposure. In other words, the darker the local sunlight, the darker the indigenous population's skin. This pattern is so consistent that adding just a few additional climate variables accounts for nearly all global variation in human skin tone. It says this tells us something important. Dark, UV protective skin is not one option among many. It is the ancestral state of modern humans. Every population that lives in or near the tropics, from sub-Saharan Africa to southern India to Aboriginal Australia, independently maintained deep pigmentation because the same UV pressures that darkened our ancestors' skin continue to operate today. The evidence is also consistent with studies that say lighter skin in Europe is a relatively recent development, only appearing tens of thousands of years after humans first left Africa. So the question we should be asking is, if the first humans had dark melanated skin tones, how could Adam, Seth, Abraham, and the descendants of Jacob look any different if pale skin is a recent development? All of the original people on every continent were shades of brown. However, religious leaders fabricated a story that says Noah had one black, one brown, and one white son. Now, even if we bought into that lie that the sons of Noah look like they came out of a crayon box, Shem had copper color skin, and the ancient Israelites descended from him. let's refer back to a book published in 1788 called Bible Defense of Slavery: An Origin, Fortunes, and History of the Negro Race, where it says, incidental evidence in relation to the belief that Adam was created red is afforded by Moses in tracing the genealogical descent of one of the sons of Adam, namely that of Seth, from his father down to the patriarch Jacob, who was the immediate progenitor of the 12 tribes of the house of Israel. It says, now as the Israelites are red, or a dark copper-colored race, in their pure and unamalgamated condition, aids in proving that Adam was also of the same complexion, because Seth, an immediate son of Adam and Eve, was the direct progenitor of the Hebrew or Israelite people, commonly called the lineage of the holy seed. So the author refers to the book of Genesis. It says, where the true genealogy of that race is traced out, coming down from Adam to Noah, then from Noah to Abraham, and from thence to Jacob, the head of the 12 tribes of the Israelites. We're going to look at some images that are in the British Museum. This comes from World History Foundation. It's called Siege of Lachish Reliefs at the British Museum. So it says these reliefs have been studied by countless people. Not many do so through the eyes of the Lachish people. Who are these people? They are Israelites. Here are images from one of the panels. You see Israelites being thrown from a wall. Look at the hair texture. You see woolly hair depicted when you look at the hair and the beards. So the information found in the article about this panel says the Assyrian king Sennacherib sits on his luxurious chair on a low mound. There is a tent behind him. His commander-in-chief stands before him in a very close proximity and greets him after conquering the city of Lachish. Assyrian soldiers, the king's bodyguards, wear their exquisite military uniform and carry their weapons. Prisoners from Lachish are being reviewed and presented to the king. One prostrates and another 2 kneel. They seem to ask for mercy. Most likely they were later beheaded. It says the king obviously had been watching the battle and its victorious aftermath. So this is from Neo-Assyrian period between 700 and 692 BCE from Nineveh or modern-day Iraq. And this scene comes from panels 11 through 13. Here's another close-up. The caption says, Assyrian soldiers parading the prisoners of war before Sennacherib on the right and not shown here. So the king is in the panel we just looked at. This section is focusing on the Israelite captives. You can clearly see the features depicting them with Negroid features. The caption says, most likely these figures represent the heads of the rebellion. All of them are barefooted and wear nothing on their head, which is a sign of humiliation. All of them seem to ask for mercy. One prostrates, 2 kneels, and the other 3 stand before the king. You all, this relief is presenting historical documentation from Scripture. It's a record that this happened. We're also seeing a visual depiction of what the ancient Israelites looked like. The people in the relief are from the tribe of Judah, and they had Negroid features. Let's see what is recorded in Scripture regarding this siege. This is from 2 Kings 18:13 through 16. And in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Turn away from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will pay. And the king of Assyria assessed Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Most High and in the treasuries of the king's house. At that time Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Most High and from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. It goes on to say Sennacherib recorded this victorious military campaign in a series of wall reliefs, which decorated room 36 of his southwest palace at Nineveh. These reliefs were probably painted, but even without any colors, they are astonishing historical documents, just like a film in stone. The reliefs were about 2.5 meters in height and would have run in a continuous frieze almost from the floor to the ceiling within that room. Neglected for 2,500 years, today these wall reliefs are now housed in room 10B of the British Museum. It says the reliefs talk about the military siege and capture of the Judean city of Lachish. The Assyrians at first reached the area and established a base camp for its army. They then laid a siege around the city for weeks. Meanwhile, the Assyrians gradually built artificial mud brick ramps in order to transfer their war machines and warriors to the city gate and walls. It goes on to say Hezekiah's decision to not pay tribute and rebel against Assyrians resulted in devastating consequences. Lachish was destroyed and its Israelite inhabitants were exiled. Sennacherib besieged Hezekiah within Jerusalem, and he's quoted as saying, like a bird in a cage. He wrote that in his Annals of Sennacherib. Ironically, it says, Hezekiah did pay the tribute at the end. So based on the evidence that the original human beings had brown skin from Adam to Shem to Abraham, we can see that the ancient Israelites would have shared a similar appearance. And they also looked like their neighbors in that geographical location. We have a lot of scriptural evidence telling us that they often interacted with the Egyptians. Moses was mistaken for an Egyptian. Joseph's brothers couldn't distinguish him from the Egyptians. He also married an Egyptian woman. Paul was mistaken for an Egyptian, so obviously they maintained the same hue. Now, looking at historical records from Egyptian tombs, such as the one at Reckmeyer, we're going to see what the ancient Egyptians looked like because they painted pictures of themselves. This serves as historical evidence that they had melanated skin tones. Something else to consider is that the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt for centuries, and many of them were forced to work in the hot sun making bricks. Now, using just a little bit of common sense, it should tell you that those with pale skin would not be able to do manual labor in that type of heat for centuries. No, you needed people of a darker hue. Let's look at this article from Biblical Archaeology Society. It's entitled Pharaoh's Brick Makers, and it's going to highlight some of the images from the Dynasty 18 tomb of Reckmeyer labeled TT100 Levantine. It says, contrary to popular belief, the Bible does not assert that during their sojourn in Egypt the Israelites were involved in building the pyramids, although fundamental questions remain regarding the presence of Israelites in Egypt and the Exodus, including the dating and scale, it is certain that the most impressive stone-built pyramids of the Old Kingdom from the 27th to the 22nd century BCE predate the biblical Exodus by hundreds of years. So the article is disputing the argument that the Israelites built the pyramids, but it is confirming that they were involved in brick making like the Bible says. It says the book of Exodus makes two basic assertions. Prior to the biblical Exodus, the Israelites in Egypt were forced to make mud bricks, and they built supply cities. In Exodus 5:6-8, we read, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the Israelites as well as their supervisors, saying, You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. It says this makes it clear that the Israelites' task was to manufacture mud bricks, which is, in less specific terms, further confirmed in Exodus 1:14, where it says the Egyptians made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. So you can see the folks working in several of the images painted on the walls of the Theban tomb of Rekhmire, and this is from the mid-15th century BCE. The caption says, These realistic scenes depict slaves manufacturing mud bricks, included in all stages of brick making, like fetching the water, kneading of clay, and carrying moistened clay to brick makers. And the top register depicts forming of bricks using a mold, turning of formed bricks out of a mold, and leaving the bricks to dry in the sun. Now, this academia.edu journal article is also quoting passages from the book of Exodus regarding the Israelites making bricks in Egypt. It's entitled With and Without Straw, How Israelite Slaves Made Bricks. So I want to focus on the images used in the article. Again, we see the workers with various shades of brown skin. Here's another image of them making the mud bricks, and you don't see phenotypes with pale skin and flowing hair. The caption says, Slaving away. Nubian and Semitic slaves mix water and mud to create mud bricks, while a seated Egyptian official in the upper right oversees their work. This painting comes from Rekhmire's tomb in Thebes and depicts the process of manufacturing mud bricks. Let's look at some additional paintings found in the tomb. So you saw a lot of people with different shades of copper color and dark brown skin tones. We see the Hebrews interacting with Egyptians before Israel became a nation. And we know that the Most High said He made Himself known to the children of Israel when they were in the land of Egypt. That comes from Ezekiel 20, verse 5. The question we should be asking is why all the lies? There are several reasons why they go to such lengths to be deceptive, and we're going to look at a few of them. When you figure this out, you'll understand what is motivating them. If you look at the pattern since the beginning of colonization, you will see that white skin is a tool to divide and conquer. It creates a hierarchy based on race. It's a war on dark skin. But why are they so antagonistic towards those with melanated skin? Let's read some excerpts from this article from the conversation called "Whiteness is an Invented Concept That Has Been Used as a Tool of Oppression." It says whiteness is a modern colonial invention. It was devised in the 17th century and used to provide the logic for genocide and slavery. The first recorded mention of white people, historians concur, is in English playwright Thomas Middleton's 1613 play called The Triumph of Truth. Ever since the 17th century, people across the world, from the Dominican Republic and Morocco to India and New Zealand, have been variously granted or denied rights on the basis of being deemed white or non-white. Whiteness thus has consistently entailed opposition, power, and subjugation. It says research shows that this theme of whiteness as power and unity has persisted even as the boundaries of whiteness have shifted. As European powers colonized various parts of the world, they implemented and refined racial categories. In colonial Barbados, 17th century labor codes described indentured Europeans as white and gave them more rights than enslaved Africans on that basis. This ensured that the two groups would not unite in rebellion against wealthy planters. As African American studies expert Edward B. Rugmer has argued, this also codified racial distinction as a tool of mastery and was replicated in Jamaica and South Carolina. Crucially, it hinged on the fact that enslaved black people had no legally recognized rights, whereas European-born white servants did. Slave status was for life, without recourse, and heritable. In other Caribbean and Latin American colonies, the term white gradually replaced the term Christian as the designation for European settlers. And this is something you have to get, that during those days, the term Christian meant white European. It says in Haiti, French colonial officials grouped people into an array of categories that conflated race and class. Grand blancs or big whites, petite blancs, little whites, free coloreds, and slaves, with the overarching distinction being between whites and non-whites. As you can see, whiteness is a political tool. You can see how it's being used today in America. Now the talking point is that whites were discriminated against and they deserve reparations. Just forget about how they discriminated against brown people for centuries. That is not up for discussion. And by the way, we don't need to know how you've been mistreated because we're going to erase all of that. And this supremacist mindset didn't just happen here. This is why they wanted to erase the historical accomplishments in Africa. Anything that had to do with greatness or ingenuity had to have a white label stamped on it. Surely the first man had to be white. God had to be white. His son had to be white. Their weapon of choice is the same one used by the evil one. Deception, the twisting of words. Yes, guns played a major part in that, but that wasn't their only weapon. They used words. And this is why I'm saying we were given a history that is not ours. And it's time to learn the truth. This says, what has made whiteness such an enduring, powerful tool is its nonsense logic. And it is nonsense. It says, as writer Robert P. Baird recently put it, how ill-defined it is as a label. It can and has been defined in whatever way best serves to consolidate power for the ruling group, echoing the division between enslaved people and indentured servants centuries earlier. Working class people in the 20th century were pitted against one another by appeals to whiteness. Now it talks about when whiteness was used to enact violence. It says, however, as much as whiteness enables power, it also fuels anxiety because the category is at once ill-defined but also bestows great power. People who find themselves in that category have consistently been at great pains to protect it. This is happening right now, you all. Historically, it says, and still today, in the minds of many of those who stand most to benefit from it, whiteness must be kept pure. Thus, colonial officials in the British Empire treated white settlers as citizens with rights, but indigenous and enslaved people as threats to be suppressed and controlled. In essence, this is a tool of the minority race to maintain control and remain in power. The minorities are ruling through deception. Let's find out why. This information comes from World Metrics. It's talking about how quickly the world's population is diversifying, with non-white groups growing faster and projected to dominate future demographics. This fear is behind the drastic actions being taken by this administration. The writing is on the wall. This says, while the world's demographics are undergoing a seismic shift toward greater racial and ethnic diversity, a closer look at the data reveals profound stories of growth, disparity, and the complex realities of population distribution. As of 2023, the global white population is approximately 1.2 billion, comprising 16% of the world's total population. Let that sink in. The bottom line is that the minority population is at a point where they cannot replace themselves because their numbers are dwindling too fast. So they are looking for other strategies to hold on to power. Those who came on the scene at a later point in time only make up 16% of the world's total population. And they use their fear of extinction to control the masses by making them believe that those with white skin are a superior race and they have a right to rule. But that's not the only reason for the deception. We need to dig deeper to see what else is motivating them as it pertains to descendants of the children of Israel. We will continue that discussion on the live this coming Wednesday, so be sure to join me for that. You can help us get the truth out there by sharing these messages, and also remember to like, hype, and subscribe if you have not already done so. We normally upload messages on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Yah willing. Join me next time.